Hit the recording button. Thank you, sir. So again, hopefully everyone is here for the 2024 kayaking season planning webinar. And we appreciate you joining us this evening. One of the things I do want to acknowledge is I know there were several people, including myself at one point, with the link that it was showing an error or people were unable to register. So those who reached out to me, we were able to figure that out, whether it was through myself registering them and them getting the link or whatever. So don't know what the situation was, but I do want to acknowledge that and apologize for any confusion or frustration anyone may have had on that end. My name is Steve Bennett, Senior Director of Sports and Competition here at Special Olympics Maryland. We also will have Jack Brocious from Kent County, our kayaking director, joining the webinar this evening. Mike Sarnowski from the state headquarters, the Vice President of Sports, and Zach Cintron serving as the moderator from the state office. His official title, I believe, is Senior Director of IUS High School Sports, and then he's also serving in this capacity as the Baltimore City kayaking coach. So several roles that Zach will be filling tonight. So we'll go ahead and get started. So basic agenda and the things we're going to cover tonight. Some administration things and paperwork and certifications that everyone needs to be aware of are a typical thing that we speak about in the preseason webinars for each of our sports. Talk about the certifications for coaches and head coaches, the deadlines and dates for the upcoming season, qualifying for the state championship, the rules and reminders for the sport of kayaking, obviously, and then some resources and things of that nature at the end. As you noticed, this webinar is being recorded. We will post the link as well as the slide deck that you see tonight on our coach's resource page and send you out information regarding that. In the meantime, if you do have a question as we go through the webinar this evening, you can either use the icon that indicates you have a question and raise your hand, or simply type it into the chat box. And as I indicated earlier, Zach will be monitoring those to see what questions come in and address them accordingly, either answering them in the chat or stopping me during the presentation and addressing those as we go along. We'll start with the important dates for this season. So we are still working with Jack Brocious to confirm when we will be setting the course for the time trials and then leaving them up for the finals, making any adjustments leading into the finals from any adjustments that need to be made for that week in between the time trials and the finals. As we've indicated in the past, if there are any coaches or assistant coaches, head coaches, whatever, who would like to come and assist with the setup of the course, that would be much appreciated. It is a very long process depending on who you have. There is also a possibility for that to be considered or potentially be considered for a sport-specific coach's training course for the sport of kayaking. It's obviously later in the season. However, it's something that we feel is valuable, and we can work with you and Jack on what that means and when that exactly will occur. So tentatively, we're looking at potentially August 9th, but it could be a little earlier. We're still working that out based on Jack and our schedules here at the state office. Another important date there, June 8th. Everyone should have received or hopefully received my email indicating the in-person coaches training. That will be in Baltimore, and we'll talk about that in a slide coming up later tonight. We also have August 10th, which is our time trials. Again, that's required for anybody going on to the finals or the state championships. The rain date for that is August 11th. And then that next weekend, we have our state championship scheduled for August 17th with the rain date of the following day on the 18th. Hopefully this isn't new to anybody unless you're a brand new coach. We've talked about this with many, many years. And just a reminder that no athlete, volunteer, coach can participate in any manner with the training program, practices, or anything regarding Special Olympics Maryland without the current paperwork and everything in place. Basically, what that comes down to for athletes is their valid medical and current medical form. And then for others, it's their volunteer application and their CDW as well. So no exceptions to this policy. And we'll talk about that in a little bit as well in regards to when everything needs to be in place and how you as a head coach can work with your area leadership to get all that in place. One of the things that's a little bit of a change, but we think it's going to prove very beneficial, is we have been in the process of combining, if you will, the medical forms and volunteer applications to include the CDW, or the communicable disease waiver form. So with this now, those are going to be linked up to both the volunteer application, and the medical form for athletes will include a page with the CDW form, so that when we receive those, it's all inclusive of those pieces of information, so that they all have the same expiration date moving forward. That is different than what has been in place. You may have noticed in previous where a certain individual may have an expiration date of a CDW of a given time frame, and then the medical form or the volunteer application expires, in a couple of weeks later, and then you're following up to get everything. We hope that this will consolidate that. Well, we'll consolidate it, but we also hope it proves beneficial for everyone else moving forward. Just to note that both of those forms, whether it's the application or the medical, does require a signature, as well as the CDW. So moving forward, how we'll check that, and you can work with your area leadership. All area directors have been given this information and talk through the processes. So again, just really strive to work with your area leadership to make sure everyone's on the same page and is informed of the processes. So the forms will now, if we have a form without a CDW, we'll hold that and process it, but won't process it fully until the CDW is submitted. We know this is a transaction, and we're moving into a new phase, so we know there's going to be a little bit of time to catch up and get everybody on the same page, but just to make sure everyone's aware of that. Special
Steve,
Mayor.
sorry,
Yep.
just to clarify, so this has already happened. You've been talking sort of as it's going to and so on.
Okay.
This has already happened. We've gone through the everybody in GMS, at least who's in the sports training space, or had listed as having participated in training or a sports program in the last year and a half. And if we have a medical or a volunteer app and their CDW, we've synced them up already. But yeah, just going forward, this is what is going to be required, but it is in place now. It's not a future tense.
Gotcha. Thank you for that clarification, Mike. My apologies there for any confusion. Jean, I see you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I have a coach who has no printer, no fax machine, and she submitted all of her paperwork with an electronic signature. So why aren't electronic signatures accepted?
So if it's an actual true electronic signature, they are accepted. What we get oftentimes from folks is they type their name in, creatively use a script font, and assume that's an electronic signature. It's not. If it's an actual electronic signature with the certification on it and so on down the line, it absolutely is accepted.
Okay, I will follow up with her.
Okay, thanks. And if there's a connect offline, if you can give me the name of the person, I can potentially look up what was submitted and such. But no, we absolutely do accept electronic signatures that are true electronic signatures.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Jean, for the question. Thank you, Mike, for the answer. So as we talked about, working with your area leadership, this is your first defense mechanism and the first communication you should have. All athletes, unified teammates, coaches, anyone who's involved in your training program should have all their papers completed and in the hands of your area leadership, which will then make sure that we have them here at the state office. So again, making sure that all of the paperwork and everything is in place is for the health and safety of everyone involved. And what we strongly recommend, so that there's no disappointments coming into your first practice or training session, if you will, is that you work with those who have an interest in the program, whether it's an athlete, a teammate, a coach, a chaperone, a sport volunteer. Make sure before the first practice, well in advance of your first practice or training session, is that everything's in place and you're ready to go, so that your first practice, you don't have to turn people away, say, hey, we don't have this form for you. Come back in a couple weeks. Again, we want to make sure everybody's in compliance, and then also has the opportunity to participate for the full duration of your training sessions in all of your practices. Here's a basic grid to show what is involved for each participant or what needs to be submitted through your area leadership here to the state office. So we've talked about the athletes with their medical form and their CDW. Then you look at the unified teammates and general volunteers that support your program. You add in the protective behaviors, and then instead of the medical, it's the volunteer application and screening. We get to the sport volunteers. We add in the concussion certification, again, for health and safety of everyone involved. We get to the assistant coaches. We then add the assistant sport certification, and that's the coaching Special Olympics athlete course. And then we have the head coaches, which adds into the sport-specific training component for any given sport leading into the season. So once again, you see here noted at the bottom, make sure everybody also has that CDW that's highlighted in red here. That's a carryover going back to when the pandemic started. This is just another slide to indicate what we just talked about in the previous slide. It just gives some more information in a better, not a better, but a different layout of what is needed. So again, just work with the area leadership, and you can also look at our coaches resource page, as we'll talk about later, to get all the information that's needed to make sure everyone has what they need. This is another spreadsheet, if you will. Thanks to our friend from Howard County, Janet Larimore, put this together. Some people find this more helpful with the color codes and everything else. Has the same information here. One thing I will note on this one, when you see advanced coach, you'll see at the very end there is the principles of coaching course. And that's not required at the state level. That's an advanced coach. And what the advanced coach term is used for is for any coach who has the opportunity or interest in coaching Special Olympics athletes or teams going to a national invitational tournament, a USA Games, or a World Games. That is a requirement to have that advanced coach status. Again, great course, not required at the state level. But if you're looking to continue education as a coach, don't hesitate to take that course again. We think it's very helpful and good to know. But I did want to make that distinction that the advanced coach is for higher levels above the state level, if you will. Here we'll talk about some deadlines that are upcoming for the season. So the first one we have is July 5th. That is the training registration due. What is the training registration? That is the time frame and the deadline by which everyone in your training program must be registered in GMS, or the Games Management System. Typically, that's done through your management team or designee from the area leadership or county leadership program. So again, that's all the paperwork we talked about earlier. Everything's got to be in. Those individuals will be registered in your training program and therefore are eligible to move on to the state championships. What we also want to recognize here is just because that's the deadline for training to be eligible to come to the state championship, if you have an individual who moves in town and is after this deadline, they can by all means join your training program, provided all the other information is in place. They just won't be eligible to move on to the state championships, okay? Just want to make that clear. The other thing I want to make clear here is the deadlines we're talking about here are when things are absolute deadline for the state office to have in place. We talked a little earlier about working with your area or county leadership. In many cases, and rightfully so, they need a week or two in lead of this deadline to make sure they have the paperwork, they go through it, they have their copies, they submit it to us. So again, work with the area leadership. And many times these deadlines, you will hear different deadlines from your area leadership saying, I know it's July 5th for the state, but I need it by June 29th or June 20th or whatever. So again, so we talked about in advance of your first training session, make sure everything's in place and you have everything ready to go. We know that some things happen and we're all human, so we can make mistakes. We can miss something here and there. So that's the next deadline we'll talk about. That's the last date for missing forms. And that is July 18th. So that's an instance, hey, we thought we had the CDW for this given athlete or coach. I know we've had it here. It didn't get to the state office. Hey, they just notified us. We have it. It just somehow didn't make it to the state office. We will have to have everything in place. If there is anything that we find that's missing, no later than July 18th. And again, you'll be notified through your area leadership, potentially through us as well, to say, here are some pieces of information that we're missing, and we need them by this deadline. Again, when we look at the paperwork, don't just make sure that they're current and valid when your practice sessions start. You also want to look at when the expiration of those pieces of information occurs. Everyone needs to have all of it valid through August 18th, 2024. So when you're looking at it, don't say, yeah, they're good. Oh, shoot, it's valid, but it expires August 10th. That won't be acceptable, okay? So we want to make sure that when you're starting your season, you use August 18th as the deadline for anything expiring. After that, they'll have to renew everything, but we want to make sure everyone's eligible who wants to be for the state championships. Our last deadline we'll talk about is the competition registration deadline. That's for the time trials and the state championships. So everything needs to be in our system by August 1st. And what I mean by in our system, we have the paperwork up to this point. We have everything ready to go. We have your training rosters. This is when you're inputting people who will be coming to the time trials and the state championships, not just their names and their role, but those competitors, what their events are and what their times are. We obviously will do some checks at the time trials to get everyone on the same body of water and the same weather conditions in order to make a fair competition for finals. But again, that August 1st deadline is when everyone should have all of their events, etc., into the games management system. And again, work with your area leadership. There's usually a designated person or two who has been trained to enter all that information in.
Hey,
So
Steve,
here
quick
Yep.
question on that end. When it comes to registering folks on the first for that deadline, or previous to the first for that deadline, knowing that we're primarily registering our athletes for time trials, right? Because then we carry everything over from time trials.
Yep.
If we have an athlete that we're like in between, that they could be a 200, 500 athlete, or they may still be a 100, 200 athlete, do you want us to register them for all three? I know we've kind of caught times for all three before, then had coaches made decisions coming out of time trials, or is that a TBD individual basis type of ask?
Yeah, I
So-
would say it's this.
Steve, I can answer that. So yes,
Okay.
thanks, Zach, for the question. Yes, you can go ahead and enter them at time trials before anybody leaves. You can adjust your the events for the athletes, all of your athletes, hopefully not all of them, but some of them, based on how they performed at the time trial. But it has to be turned in at time trials because the competition is a week later. But yeah, you can go ahead, and kayaking is one, as are the two snow sports, where we can make that kind of an adjustment based on seeing the athlete at the time trial event.
Perfect. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. So speaking of events, here's some information in regards to the entry process and how that process will work. So athletes and unified teammates, or their unified partners, can enter up to 3 events, okay? So with that, think of it as the progression. So we have a 100, we have a 200, we have a 500, and a 1K. Think of it as progression. So somebody cannot be in the 100 meter and also the 500 or 1K. And that's basically because the 100 meter event is intended for those athletes of lower ability level who yet to have the skill set to go for those longer distances, okay? So when you look at singles and doubles in the same distance, that's fine. And then down at the bottom, you see, again, the progression I was talking about. If they want to do 3 events, one example is an individual can be in the 200, the 500, and the 1K. Fine. Another person could be in the 100 singles, 100 unified doubles, and the 200 meter unified doubles. So again, that's the progression. They're leading up to those longer distances, or that just may be their ability level, which is fine. But again, it's not skipping over a level or a distance, if you will. So if you have any questions, you can reach out to me. My email is later in the slide deck, and we can talk through any one-offs you have. But as a basic rule of thumb. And this is what we will move forward with. Wanted to make sure everyone's understanding of that. So when we look at the events that we'll be offering, we talked about them, some of them there in the previous slide, but yeah, we'll have the 100-meter individual and the 100-meter doubles, which can be either two athletes or an athlete and a unified teammate. Then we have the 200-meter, same thing, individual and the doubles, the 500 individual and 500-meter doubles, and the individual 1K and the doubles 1K as well. So again, one of the things Special Olympics Maryland has incorporated the 100-meter. That's not an official event through Special Olympics International, but it's one that we have added here at Special Olympics Maryland, which is fine to do once you have approval and everything else. And we feel that that was important for us to do to allow and give athletes who may not be able to do the 200 and longer distance the opportunity to participate in the sport. So again, just want to make sure everyone's aware of that. I can find my cursor here. So the coaches training, we talked a little bit about that, the one in-person one that we have, and this would be the sport-specific training option for the individuals that want to be or are looking to renew their head coaching status. And anybody can take it, which is preferred and welcomed. But these will be on, or this one will be on June 8th. And you can see the address there. It's in Baltimore at the Middle Branch Recreation Center. We want to thank Zach Cintron for helping spearhead that, along with Jack, who will be there, and Bob Signer as our representatives there in the Baltimore area to make sure this is all provided. When I sent out the link, along with the webinars and other information to all you coaches, hopefully you received that a day or two ago, the survey link there to sign up for that course. As I indicated in the email, not sure what's going on with technology. It's not just me. But at the end of that survey, when you're filling out your program and your name and your email address to sign up to come to this course, the very bottom, there's a little white box that typically is red and it says submit. It's blank and it's just a little white box shadow. Just click on that. It has worked for several people already, but I just want to make sure. I know when I first went to sign up for it, I was like, well, where do I hit submit? And I just kind of guessed and it worked. So I want to make sure that everyone's aware of that. Don't freak out. Just hit that white box and you should get a notification you have been registered for this successfully. With that being said, at this point, we just have the one in-person training for sport-specific for kayaking option available. We know that there are at least one individual who is unable to make it, who needs to renew their certification as a head coach. We are always looking, not just for kayaking, but other sports throughout the year, of any suggestions that individuals may have via an online course. We're all in this together. There may be things that we're not knowledgeable or aware of that are out in the world that you think may serve as a good coaching course online for the sport of kayaking, or any other sport for that matter. So if you have something like that that you think is valuable and could serve in that capacity, please forward that along to us at the state office. Right now, that would be to me. We'll take a look at it, whether it's Jack, myself, one or two other people, to see if it's a viable course that serves a purpose and possibly be incorporated into our options. There's another option that we are looking at, which we have offered in the past, which Jack, obviously, if you don't know Jack, a wealth of knowledge, and he has offered at times to have individual coaches come to Washington College to one of their practices to talk through his strategies, his training components, etc. And if you have an interest in that, you can see the dates and times when those are potentially offered, and we can work with Jack directly. And Jack, I see your hand up. If you want to mention something there, that this would be the time. Hey Jack, you need to unmute yourself. And while Jack's looking for that button,
okay,
there you go.
Can you hear me now?
Yep, I can hear you, Jack.
Okay, I'm willing to run a coach's clinic on a Saturday or Sunday if that's more convenient for people at the boathouse.
Okay. Yeah, appreciate that. Like I said, if you have an interest, I know that there was at least one or two people who had expressed the fact that they are unable to make it or don't think they can make it on June 8th, and what other options are there. Thank you very much, Jack, for stepping up and making that opportunity. If you are in that situation, just reach out to me and I can put you in touch with Jack and we'll talk through the possibilities there. So appreciate that, Jack. So now we'll talk about qualifying for the state championships. We've already talked about all the paperwork and requirements as far as the administrative pieces. All of that has to be in place by the deadlines that we talked about. And again, just as I can't stress it enough, make sure you have everything in place before your first session starts. We don't want to turn anyone away or find out later that there's been a violation or a situation that we have to address. Never fun to do that. So again, just really make sure everything is ready to go. The other thing here is we talk about qualifiers. And one of the things here at Special Olympics Maryland we always want to do, and I think and I hope all you coaches are in the same mindset, is we want to provide as many competition opportunities as possible for the athletes and unified teammates. I always use an example of when I was growing up, I played soccer. So what fun is it for me to sign up to play a sport for 8 to 12 weeks I'm training and I only get to play one game, and that's the state championships? I would never come back. So the more opportunities we give for our athletes to have a competitive experience, really put their skills to the test, the better they're going to be and the better coaches you'll be to understand their capabilities and things to work on and things like that. You obviously pick up on some of that in the practice sessions. But for qualifying events, they have to participate in a minimum of 2. One of those must be a multi-area or multi-county program. So it's not just your county athletes or your area athletes competing amongst themselves. One of them must be with other athletes from other programs. Now, the time trials on August 10th can count as one of those or count as this one, but we're also looking for others. Again, the more competitive experiences we give the athletes, the better prepared they'll be. So we can talk amongst ourselves. If you're interested in hosting one, let us know. We can help get the information out to coaches. We can post it on our coaches resource page, etc. The other one, again, to get to the minimum of 2 qualifying events, can be a in-house qualifier, if you will. You can have turn a practice session into a qualifier, etc. So again, we're looking for one minimum of multi-area and then another one at the absolute minimum. So again, our goal is to get our athletes prepared for the competitive experience and be ready to go ahead to move on to the state level championships. What is a qualifying competition? What's the purpose of it? Well, we just kind of talked about the purposes of it. What are the requirements for hosting that qualifying competition? Well, it needs to emulate the state level championships. It doesn't have to have all the pomp and circumstance. It doesn't have to have the parade of athletes, the torch, the opening ceremony. It doesn't have to have that, but look at the competitive components that are needed. So we want the rules to be implemented and followed and enforced. Not just the competition rules, but all the rules involved. And we'll talk about some of those with our reminders later, but the safety components most importantly as well. Have appropriate trained and certified officials or judges. With the timers, we want to make sure that it's a true competition experience. Lanes on the course, that's something we haven't required necessarily in the past. We know that there are some complications from a labor-intensive perspective and others. But I will say, if you're able to put out some buoys and create the lanes or some barriers or something of that nature, again, we've seen some athletes struggle at time trials and at championships, staying in their lane or getting that visual. So the discussion here is that's not an absolute requirement. It's highly suggested and recommended. And I know that it does take a lot of time and effort to get that in place. We collectively can come up with some ideas of what works. If you have something that you found that works well with your program, send me an email and we'll collectively gather that and share it with other coaches. You need to have medical on site, not just with kayaking, but with any competition qualifier, if you will. But again, medical EMT or higher needs to be on site to address any safety or medical emergencies that may arise. In some cases, it's blisters and things of that nature. Just want to make sure everyone's in a healthy and safe environment. Again, we talked about ideally, it includes not just your own folks, but members and teammates and teams from other county programs. But we did talk about an in-house qualifier can be an option if that's kind of a last resort. But we understand the parameters here. If you're hosting one, which everyone should at least host one, even if it's just an in-house, make sure that your area director is notified 30 days in advance. So as coaches, think about now, when am I going to have that? And we need notice here at the state office 30 days in advance of when that happens. So again, start thinking about that now, work with your area leadership. When am I going to host this? And on that form, it talks about our other counties invited, what's the address, is there any support needed from the state office, things of that nature. But again, that must be submitted by the area director and area leadership and submitted to me at this time until a sports director is available to continue on. I should have mentioned that in the beginning. We do have 2 sports directors positions that are vacant currently. So this isn't what I'm serving as the interim role, if you will, for the sports director for the sport of kayaking. Again, if we
Steve, I'm
Yep.
sorry. No. Finish what you were saying. I thought you would finish.
I was going to say, if we don't have that information, there is a possibility that the qualifying competition will not be approved or not be recognized as a qualifying event. So, Mike, if there's something else you want to add there.
No, just I know we have a fair number of folks, and I apologize if you said this and I missed it. But we're using the term in-house, and everyone may not understand what that means. Could you just give a 30-second description for anybody who's not familiar with that term?
Yeah, thank you, Mike. So an in-house is when I was referring to if you are going to have an in-house qualifier, that's turning basically a practice into a competitive experience or a qualifying event just for your program only and your competitors in your own training program. So an in-house is meaning, hey, this is our house in Kent County and no one else is invited. We don't have the capacity, whatever else. We can't get to any other qualifiers. We've tried everything possible to get to another one. We just can't make it. We're going to turn a practice session into a qualifying event with all the components we just talked about. So that's an in-house, if you will, in your own house. Nobody else is allowed in. So hopefully that helps clarify that. Qualifying competition, just some more information here. We talked about the time trials and the dates there. Just so everyone's aware, that one is a requirement. Anybody looking to go onto the state championships absolutely must compete in the time trial event on August 10th. Again, that's in Chestertown. Those of you, hopefully everyone knows or has been there before. Beautiful campus, beautiful boathouse, beautiful waterfront. Just a gorgeous place to have an event such as we're able to have there. Right now, we talked about the qualifying events and the sanction forms. I don't have any at this time other than the time trial, if you will. So again, you can send any of that information, or if you have questions about it, don't hesitate to reach out to me. My email address is here, and later on in the slides, also, I think, shows my cell number as well. But again, if you're hosting one or interested in hosting one, whether it's an in-house, as we talked about, or you're able to invite other county programs, on that form, it does say, if there's a limit, say, yeah, I want to invite other county programs, but I can only have 10 more athletes or 5 more athletes above and beyond what we currently have. Just make that note on that so that when we send it out, we can put, hey, this is a time limit or first come, first serve or whatever. One of the things at the state championships that has been working very, very well over the last 2 years. We appreciate all of you guys at the county level and coaches getting your personnel in place. A couple years ago, it had been a little bit of a struggle to make sure we had enough personnel to help get all the boats and crafts in and off the water to staging, etc. You guys have really stepped up. We thank you so much. Collectively, it's our job to make the event a good experience. So again, we're asking that each team has a couple volunteers to help move the boats around. And then at the staging area, We'll also have a 10 by 10 tent where we make announcements and look for the final staging as the crafts and the kayaks get up to the waterfront, getting ready to head out to final staging on the water. To have one individual from your county program hanging around that area so that if an athlete hasn't reported, that they're able to go track that individual down, get them there so that they don't miss their event. Again, it's been working very well the last 2 years, and we want to continue that. So your continued participation and assistance is greatly appreciated. A couple rule reminders here. The 2022 rules are still in effect. You can find that on our coaches resource page, and that's the link there that'll take you directly to that site. In regards to uniforms, everyone has to wear their shorts or pants during all practices and competitions. Everyone has to have the PFDs, or the personal flotation devices, with a whistle, and they must be worn by everyone while they're on the water or on the dock. Helmets are optional. I just made up a new word. Helmets are optional. And then water shoes and glasses and things like that are not required, but are optional as well. Continuing on with rule reminders, there needs to be and must be an umpire safety boat on the water during practice sessions and during competitions. The number of those individuals that are needed will depend on the weather, other factors that come into place, how long the course is, etc. So again, take that into consideration. If you have any questions, you can reach out to me, and if I don't know the answer, I will look into finding that answer for you. Anyone who's in a kayak must be wearing their PFD, or personal flotation device, at all times. Again, we talked about, depending on your facility or your venue, if it's a dock, they need to be wearing it while they're walking on the dock in case they trip or fall or whatever may happen. So anybody with that, we want to make sure that's good to go. Jack, I'll see you go ahead and unmute. You found it once. I know you can find it again.
We decided several years ago that the inflatable type PFDs were not acceptable. And we should stay with that, I feel. Just use the standard PFDs that we've been using.
Gotcha. Okay, I'll make a note of that. And again, those of you on the call, and again, it's being recorded, so those who listen to it are unable to make it at another point can listen to the recording. Pardon me while I make that note here in my notes. Okay. Thank you for that, Jack. Continuing on some other rule reminders. Athletes and teammates, whatever, must remain in the kayak at all times while on the water. No legs hanging out, things like that. If they're in the water, on the kayak, everything's inside the boat, if you will, except for the arms, obviously, that are using the paddles to go. No horseplay, funny behavior, anything that is not in the competitive nature. Anything like that, you could remove your athletes from the sport, remove them from practice, have a talk. If that happens at a time trial or state level competition, very possible they will be removed from the competition. Nobody wants that. Again, understand it can be fun out there, and you want to maybe splash somebody or whatever else. Just eliminate that. We're there for a practice session. We're there to learn. We're there to train. You can have fun once you get off of the water. But again, no horseplay. You really need to pay attention to everything going on in the water, whether it's instructional or working on your own techniques. Individuals and competitors need to be seizure-free for 1 year prior to the competing. And then this is kind of a new one. We haven't addressed this in the past, but similar to other sports of this nature, do a swimming test. Make sure the athletes can, if they fall out of the kayak or whatever else, can swim at least 25 meters, and they can use the flotation device during that swim. But again, that's for the health and safety. Want to make sure that everybody can make it to the shoreline or somewhere comparable, depending on the water, the wind, and everything else. We want to make sure that everybody can do that. We have had several individuals fall out of their crafts at the time trials or finals, and they've been fine. But again, we just want to reiterate that, or make sure everyone's aware of that new addition this year.
Steve, just for clarity on that, it's actually not a new addition. We just haven't highlighted it in the past. It's been in the rules for a bit. So,
Yep. Thanks, Mike. Okay, equipment regulations. Again, we talked about the kayaks. Within those kayaks, they are required to have the flotation device. Some people use an inflated beach ball up in the stern or the bow of the craft, and it will be checked, but we ask that you as coaches also make sure that's all in place before they get to the starting line. And I think our veteran coaches are well aware of that. The kayak should be marked with the appropriate size and make. You see an example there. And then as our veteran coaches know, we also look for tape or some kind of indicator that's permanent on the kayaks that indicate the name of the athlete that'll be using that kayak during the time trials and other competitions. And again, for practices as well, to make sure they're familiar with their own boat. In order to qualify and everything else, again, we know there can be limitations of changing kayaks and borrowing kayaks, that kind of thing. But everyone must qualify and compete in the boat of a similar size and make. It's got to be, as far as the length of the boat, minimum of 6 inches or shorter is the length size that must be in compliance if you have to change a kayak. Talked about the same style and paddles, etc. One of the things that's not accepted or will not be allowed is the sit on top type of kayaks, if you will, or some people refer to them as the surfboard style kayaks. Those are not permitted. It's more the sit-in type kayaks. If you have any questions or you're buying new kayaks, if you're not 100% sure, you can take pictures, send them to me. If I'm not 100% sure, I'll check with Jack or the sport management team and committee for the sport of kayaking. At Special Olympics events, everyone hopefully knows this. You're bringing your own kayaks. We're not providing any kayaks except for the individuals volunteers who bring their own as well to be out on the water as safety monitors and things of that nature. What you may see in the rules is, like at USA games or World Games, the organizing committee at that level provides the same kayaks for everyone. So at the state level, that's not something we do. So when we get on the water safety, efforts will be made if any to get the athletes to the starting line, to get them in and out of the water, things like that. But when you're training your athletes, make sure that the athletes know how to maneuver their craft to get to the starting line, how to back up, how to push forward, how to get to one side or the other. And at the start line, correct me if I'm wrong, Jack. The athletes should be entering the water going backwards. So they're back towards the water, their front of their body towards the beach, and they'll back out that way, then turn and head out to the staging area. Go ahead, Jack.
Don't do that. It didn't work last year. We had to go bow in. You started.
Okay, hold on just a second, Gene. Jack, go ahead. You need to unmute, Jack. You need to unmute, Jack.
Okay, this is actually a safety issue to prevent injury to the people who are actually helping to launch the boats. In all kayaks, when you sit in the boat, the weight is on the back end of the kayak. So the idea is that, since the reason for pushing people in backwards is that when the person picks up the bow to shove it in, the stern is floating on the water. So they're not lifting a lot of weight. They just kind of slide the boat out on the water. Some of our athletes weigh 250 up to 300 pounds. And to ask somebody to try to lift the boat with them in it and get it off the beach is it's very dangerous and can cause back injuries. That's it.
I understand that, but when we started last year going in backwards, it took forever. And so we ended up very shortly after the start going in bow first because people were having a hard time turning their kayaks and getting moving. Obviously, we'll do whatever you say, but going in backwards it just wasn't working well.
Well, there, all we have to do is tell the person that's launching them as they launch them to spin them so they turn around and face out. But we have a lot
Obviously,
of people who are not in good condition helping, volunteering and helping to do this. And this is the safest way to do it. And we use it now predominantly at the college, even for the recreational paddlers.
and again, if there are situations, we can take situational things that as they come, but as a rule of thumb, work on the athletes to back in, and that's for practices too. We don't want anybody to injure their backs, etc. So appreciate the question, Gene, and appreciate the follow up there, Jack.
Hey,
One of
Steve,
the
really quick before we go on, can you take a note potentially for us to reach out to Sam Boyd with volunteer recruitment to recruit specifically for more people helping launch boats? Because then, like Jack said, we can have people helping them get off the beach, and then potentially 2 or 3, as long as she posted as you'll be in the water all day. Hopefully, you like the water. To do that. Additionally, I can proactively reach out to my Delmarva Power volunteers right on the shore there. They seem like a crew that might be into that.
Yeah, I know we had a lot of volunteers through Sam Boyd's recruitment here at the state office last year who enjoyed being in the water. But again, it is very taxing to be there all day long, pulling the boats in, pulling them off, helping the athletes in and out of the crafts as well. So appreciate that, and I'll make a note of that as well.
And I do
As
appreciate that we can do this at practice. I mean, we can start doing this at practice and you get the word out to everybody and say, this is how we're launching at state games. Start doing it at practice, get used to it and get, and then our athletes can get better at spinning their boats too.
Yep, 100%. One of the other additions here to make sure everyone knows is coaches aren't allowed on the water during a competition, if you will, unless prior permission has been given, or unless that coach is also serving as a safety boat or out there on the start line to help line up the athletes. So as the commands go at the start line, it'll be racers ready. Then there'll be an air horn to indicate the start of the race. For those individuals who have a hearing impairment, there will also be a flag that will drop to indicate the start of the race. We have also, by request, in certain circumstances, hit really hard on the kayak to indicate the athlete can feel the vibration and then goes off the start. So again, we'll work with you in certain circumstances as long as you let us know ahead of time what may be working best for your given athlete. But again, that's one of the things we do have in place. If a red flag is raised at the start line, that indicates that a violation has occurred in that lane. And we do have radio communications to notify our results individuals to take note of whatever that infraction may have been. So again, if a competitor falls out of their kayak while they're racing, an opportunity would be given to that individual to get back into their kayak and resume. If the safety boats determine or the competitor says, hey, I'm done, I can't do it, we'll go ahead and assist them out of the water and get them back to the shoreline. Not just with kayaking, but with almost every sport, if you will, with few exceptions. No coaching is permitted from the shoreline, okay? And what that means is just stay away from any instructional shout outs or indicators, things of that nature. Encouragement, keep it up, good work, you got it, strong finish, keep going, you can do this, you can do this. That's what we want to hear from the shoreline, not just from coaches and other teammates, but family members as well. We have coaches or certain individuals over the years have tried to become pretty sneaky, if you will, on 1 or 2 occasions over the past 10 years and said, hey, go, go, go. We understand what that means. If it's a cadence thing, most likely you're giving instruction to that athlete. Some people in other states or other people we've heard using things like vanilla, chocolate. Well, vanilla means stroke or turn to your left. Chocolate means turn to your right. Again, don't do it. Let your families know, don't do it. Let the other teammates and other supporters know, don't do it. Keep it up. Good work. Those are the things, the encouraging type of shouting is acceptable and encouraged from the shoreline to give each competitor that warm feeling and that support while they're out on the water. We don't want to disqualify anybody for a technicality of that nature, but we have in the past and we will if it comes a point of contention. So again, just make sure nobody does it. We know most people are very well intentioned, but it's got to be fair for everyone. The results of the races and the competitions should be what the athlete or unified teammates have been working on in their skill set, not what someone else is instructing them to do out on the water. They've been practicing for 6 to 8 or 8 to 12 weeks. They're ready to go. And it can also confuse other athletes out on the course. So again, the encouragement is what we want to hear. So some rules specific to the 100, 200, and 500. If they travel outside of their lane, that's okay without impeding another competitor. But that individual must be attempting to get back into their lane, going down the course, and finish in their assigned lane. Okay? If they do impede another athlete after coming outside of their lane and impeding to another athlete, that is a disqualification. It will be notified to the finish results. And if the athlete who had been impeded upon wants to have another re-race to get a better time, if you will, more accurate time, they have that option as well. If they do not finish within their assigned lane at the finish line, that's also a disqualification. Okay. So the 1,000 or the 1K, the 1,000 meter or the 1K, the kayak who's in the lead, we do those in interval starts. So the kayak who's in the lead has the right of way. Most of the time, this comes to the turn when you're turning at the 500 around the buoy to come back. The lead kayak has the right of way. Can't try to cut in or bounce them out of the way. It's not NASCAR. You're not bumping boats and that kind of thing. You have to give the racer in front of you the right of way on those turns, etc. So I want to make sure everyone's aware of that. You can work with that for your longer distance athletes. You can set up some kind of thing on the water and work around the turns to make sure everyone's aware of that rule. Codes of conduct. Not going to read through all the codes of conduct. We have codes of conduct for athletes and teammates, for coaches, for volunteers, for officials, for everybody else involved, families, etc. And later on here, we do have at the end of the slides some more information about the codes of conduct. We also have them listed on our coaches resource page or our CRP. It basically all comes down to one thing: respect, right? Respect for the officials, no yelling, screaming, cussing, no outlandish behavior towards any other competitors, anything like that. Like we talked about, no illegal coaching, if you will, while people are out on the water. The other thing I'll list here is there's no smoking or alcohol product allowed at any competition venue. We do realize that there are, and that includes vaping and things of that nature. We do realize that there are smokers. There could be designated smoking areas, whether it's on the college campus or out in the parking lot or across the street, and then you just dispose of your product after that has happened. But again, at the training sessions, at the venues, at competition venues, things of that, no smoking and absolutely no drinking of alcohol product or being under the influence of alcohol product or any other illegal drugs.
Yeah, and Steve, that includes, you mentioned vaping, that includes cannabis as well, since that's now legally available here in Maryland recreationally. That is not permitted either. Consider that alcohol, even though I know it's not alcohol. But that's not permitted as well.
Yeah, appreciate that clarification. And again, we've had situations where we know, I don't think it's happened at kayaking to my knowledge over the years, but in other events we have had family members think, hey, there's a bar open, I'm just going to have a beer, or I've got it in my cooler or whatever. Let them know that as well. It's not a pleasant situation to have to come up to someone and say, hey, you gotta get rid of that. And then it draws attention to them and they think they've done something way outlandish. They just weren't aware. So again, just make sure everyone is aware of that situation. We'll get to some resources here. So we've talked about, we'll have an event guide that'll be distributed later in the season, and that primarily is referencing the time trials and the state championships. That'll be more detailed information, and again, we'll have a pre-competition webinar for both the time trials and the state championships with more detailed information leading up to those two events. We talked about the coach's resource page for kayaking. We're looking at updating that currently and then providing some more information as information becomes available throughout the season. These links take you straight to those outlets and those websites. When you get to Special Olympics Maryland or specialolympics.org, that's the Special Olympics International site. And you go there and it will have the sports. You go to the sports section and then you can select the icon that says kayaking. Again, there's a lot of good resources there. There's the rules that SOI or the international uses. We have one or two that are a little different here in Maryland. We talked about the 100 meter that we offer. That's not offered at the international level. There's also in the resources on their website, how to plan a training session in the coach's guide. There are videos and things of that nature that can help you as a coach be more familiar or gain a more education in regards to the sport. Again, we just want to make sure that everyone's available with those resources that are out there for you to utilize.
Steve, just for folks as a reminder with this as well, just as Steve indicated when he talked about coaches trainings, if you know of any coaches training, to let us know. If you know of a good resource that we could post or we can link to and such, please let us know. We're happy. I mean, there's no limit on how much stuff we can put on that coach resource page. We just have to keep it organized. But let us know. One of the nice things with kayaking, as well as many of our other sports, is the spirit amongst the coaches is very collegial, and folks like to share. So we would love to continue to add to that. And you guys are the experts in this sport. So let us know.
Appreciate that addition, Mike, as well. So again, just some additional things here. We talked about the coach's resource page multiple times. We also talked about the beginning. There are resources for you to work with your area leadership to look at the certification status of what coaches or other volunteers in your training program or athletes or teammates when their information is expiring. Dottie Rush here at our office does a really good job of updating the coach's resource page, where you can go yourself and look and see, hey, who's expiring or what's going on here. Does a really good job of updating that, so you can navigate through the coach's resource page and check that out yourself as well, just to make sure everything's in compliance. Here, like I said, the sports director position is currently vacant for the sport of kayaking. Hoping to do some interviews this week, but in the interim, feel free to reach out to me. I think most people on here know me, or we've talked already during leading up to this webinar. Just know that we have 2 sports directors vacancies right now, so kind of our hands are full. But there's my cell number as well, and that one is incorrect. I will update that before it goes out. Instead of 4121, it's 1421. So don't hesitate to reach out via email or phone call. Just know that I may not be able to respond in a timely manner. And it depends on who you are. Like if Jim Russell calls me, I'll probably take 2 weeks to get back to him. But no, I think we're all in this together. I only say that so that you don't get frustrated. I sent you an email at 12 o'clock this morning or this afternoon, and you haven't got back to me. It's 4 o'clock. Be patient. Hopefully I'll be able to get back to you. If you haven't heard back from me, and whether it's a phone call or an email within 48 hours, please call me back or email me back. Very possible I might have missed it or whatever else. Just want to be upfront and honest with everyone as we move forward. With that, Jack, before we get to any questions, anything else you'd like to add that I either screwed up or you want to add for the good of the group?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Go for it.
Okay. I would like to see that we state absolutely that no steering type devices are permitted in or on the boats. If you go to the resource page, go to the International Canoe Federation rules, they state that you have to have a steering device. And we would need to make sure that we say no steering devices permitted. A lot of boats that show up are ocean kayaks, which have steering devices. They've taken the rudders off, but the little gadget that the rudder is hooked to can also act as a steering device.
Gotcha.
Hey
Appreciate
Jack,
that.
can you clarify for folks that may not know what a steering device is or where a steering device is if they go to look for it on a kayak, what that typically looks like?
The steering device is a rudder. Only they either hang off the stern or they're underneath the boat, and there's a tiller bar or pedals that the feet go on. And I see more and more kayaks showing up with those, and we just want to make sure that people understand that that's not permitted. The other thing that I would like you to do, Steve, is to poll the coaches about. I can set a single line course well ahead of time. In other words, at least a week before we set the regular course, if people want to come and actually practice on a single line course, I'm going to go ahead and set that anyway, and people can actually come and practice on it. That way they'll see the 100-meter mark, they see the 200-meter mark, they see the 500-meter mark, and they can also practice the 1,000 meters.
Gotcha. Appreciate that, Jack.
And anybody that wants to join us for a practice session, they're welcome to come and join us.
One clarification with the steering devices. I agree with you in terms of in general. I do recall there was one athlete, I think it was a female athlete, who needed one due to the nature of her disability. I think in terms of being able, I don't remember exactly what the specifics were. It was several years ago. So that if there is a need for an exception, we need to have it documented and such, but we would allow for that. I don't want folks to walk away if we need to make an exception for someone, they see that and are wondering, are we backing off from the rule or the standard that we're applying? And again, I apologize, I don't remember who it was that needed it, and they only needed it 1 year, I think, if I remember correctly.
I would assume that perhaps somebody with severe visual issues would need one, and probably would actually, almost like swimming, have a person following and giving them right, left, if they can't see the lines.
Yeah, Kathy just typed in that it was her, Kathy Axline typed in that it was her athlete, and the issue was she didn't have the arm strength. And the reason we haven't seen it since is that she doesn't go to states. But so that's so anyhow, the point being is that if there's a significant challenge for an athlete and it's necessary for them to participate, we will consider it with appropriate documentation. So I don't want to have anybody be surprised if there is one or two. It would only be with an approval of an exemption for that.
The other thing is that I'm used to working with individuals with physical disabilities. I work with wounded warriors and stuff. And if somebody has somebody with a severe disability and wants an idea or some kind of, want me to come and help them work out a solution for that, I'm willing to do that.
I appreciate that, Jack. I think the main takeaway here for you as coaches is if you have a situation that potentially warrants an exemption or whatever else, reach out to us in advance so that we can either have a discussion with the management team, with our officials, and or work out a solution if one is available. But we can't do it unless we become aware of it. So reach out to us. Communication is the key. With almost all things in Special Olympics. So the more we collectively can work together and work out and find solutions, the better we all are in the end. So again, any questions or concerns, reach out. We'll collectively come up with a solution, or may not have one. But again, we need to go down that path to find out if we can find one. So again, communication. Thank you for those additions, Mike and Jack. Zach, anything that was for the good of the group that's come through the chat or has not been answered?
Pardon?
Uh,
I was talking to Zach, not Jack.
um, looking through, there was a question about how often do you need to restart as a coach? Both Mike and I responded to that about every 3 years. And then we will be adding the how to work with your athletes to get in and out of a kayak as part of the coaches training. And we'll talk about loading athletes both on shore, like we do at states, where we want you to load in backwards, back out, be prepared to turn around. We'll also talk about loading from a dock. That is something that I have to do with my athletes. And if we don't have the assisted device to help them load with the handlebars, it's really tricky. So we will go over that stuff. But there is a good question from Jim Russell. Jack, how do you measure out your course?
I have access to an airstrip, which makes it really convenient. But any kind of a long field, and you pull out a line, I get the crab line, 3/8 inch crab line is what I use for the course thing, and we crimp on clips for the buoys. And what I do is I pull out the line, and then every 20 meters, which is 64 feet roughly, I snap on a hook that then I can hook the buoy to. And but I measure it out on the ground and lay it out. It's kind of easy right now. We've got it pretty well worked out.
Yeah, I think that's the secret, Jack, right? Is you don't measure the water or the distance on the water. You measure the course lines.
Yeah.
If you're trying to measure how far things are on the water for you, Godspeed. That will be quite the adventure for you guys as coaches.
Yeah. Appreciate the question, Mr. Russell. And then, as we talked about, if while we see if there's any more questions that are coming in, as I mentioned, the course setting, once we get that dialed in and the date provided, one of the individuals who has come back a few years, once as the years ago was the sports director overseeing the sport of kayaking, but now comes to assist with the setting of the course as a Baltimore City coach. So again, the assistance is appreciated not only for the setting of the course, but as we talked about in the previous years, also pulling up the course at the end of the finals. It's a very labor-intensive situation, and the more people that can help with that process, the better we'll all be. I know several people have stepped up the last couple of years, but again, if you have any questions or you're interested in that, please let us know. We know for some people it's quite a drive, but it also can serve for knowledge. Mr. Russell looking at how we measure the course leading up to it, but then also how we set it can also be beneficial as well. So with that, Zach, anything else? And then I'll go through just the end results here in slides.
No, I don't see any other questions in the chat, and nobody's raised their hand.
Yeah,
Okay.
Steve, let me just toss one other thing to Jim and to anybody else in terms of measuring, other than using a trundle wheel or a tape measure out on the water, which could be challenging. What we use a lot of times is a Gulf range finder. So if you have someone at where your start line is going to be, and then you can have a boat go out, and you can measure. If you're not familiar with them, it does a great job in measuring, telling you how far away something is. You potentially could use that as a thing to drop a buoy for a given distance and such. So we use that for a lot of other sports as well. Distance running, snowshoeing, so on down the line.
Good deal. Thank you, Mike. So with that, we'll give you a few more minutes to see if anything comes through. But if I can get the slide deck to work with me here. The end sections here are just resources. We've talked about many of these. It'll talk about the code of conducts. It'll talk about the registration forms, things like that. So we're not going to go through this, but know that they're available here in the slide deck for you. So you can go through this at your leisure and look through this. Again, it references the codes of conduct, but on our website it has the codes of conduct for everyone, gives examples of the forms, things like that. One of the things I do always like to tell coaches is not just those forms. There's a form called the incident report form, and this is what that is. We have I believe this is on our coaches resource page as well, but your area
Yes, it
leadership,
is.
yeah,
It is there.
area, yeah, thank you, Mike. Your area leadership has these as well, but this is something you should always carry with you as a coach, along with your athlete medical forms. And this is if there's an incident or accident to two things. The first I'll talk about is an injury to an individual. This is what will need to be submitted and filled out to help with the insurance follow-up and any care that's needed afterwards. It indicates the insurance, the name of the individual, how the accident happened, where it happened, what is injured, etc. This is also a form that can be used for if there's damage to property. So it could be, you're carrying in a piece of equipment and you break a window at the facility. Oh crap, right? This is not cool. But you put this, and this is a damage, so it says incident or accident. So you think about the accident or the incident, I guess, for that matter. It could be property damage or anything like that. So again, have one of these on hand with you, or several of them as a coach at any of your training sessions or as you're traveling, etc. So just want to make sure everyone's aware of that form as well.
Yeah, I would recommend, if you aren't already doing it, keep copies along with a pen in your first aid kit. That's the best place. That's if you want it there in case you need to treat anybody anyway. So just have plenty of copies sitting there in your first aid kit, but remember to have something to write with.
One question. I read that you're requiring the CBD form to submit it. Is this yearly now? That every year we have to do this, or do we just do it with new volunteers and athletes?
So, Jack, the CDW, the communicable disease waiver, is one of the things that needs to be done every 3 years. We have incorporated it into the form. It's basically slapped on as an extra page on the volunteer form as well as on the medical form, so that when folks submit their medical form or they submit their volunteer application, they're submitting their CDW as well. It requires a signature on that actual page, and which also can be an electronic signature if it's a true electronic signature. But yeah, no, that's every 3 years. There's nothing at this point in terms of anything. At this point in time, there is no form that's required every year.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure, because people are coming back and asking me, I already filled this out. Why do I have to do it again? So now I know.
Well, what may have happened is if it expired or their volunteer application expired, we synced up the dates of the CDW and the medical. That we did this over the last several months, so that at this point in time, virtually everybody has the same expiration date for their medical form and their CDW or their volunteer application. So yes, if they're submitting a new volunteer application, they definitely would need the additional CDW because it would have expired already. Having everything expiring on the same date really makes life significantly easier for almost everybody.
And how long does a volunteer thing last? Registration last? Is that 3 years?
3 years unless they are a minor. If they're a minor, it expires on their 18th birthday.
Okay.
Everybody else, it's good for 3 years.
Okay.
Good questions. I flipped through my slides a little too quick there at the end. The last slide, or what you should be seeing right now, is a big thank you. Thank you to Jack as our venue director for kayaking and his continued efforts in support of Special Olympics Maryland and a local program there in Kent County. Thank you to you as coaches. As we mentioned, collectively, It's our job, everyone on this call and others throughout the whole organization, is to create the best environment for the athletes and anyone else in the program to have a positive experience within Special Olympics. Special Olympics Maryland takes pride in that. You guys are leaders of your program. You are the dedicated individuals who are stepping up and being coaches. We know many of you wear multiple hats. Some of you are family members of athletes or teammates. Some of you are also members of area and county management leadership. Some of you coach multiple sports. Some of you, as Jack, as a coach for swimming and also the venue director for kayaking, et cetera, et cetera. I couldn't go through all of the scenarios, but without you, Special Olympics doesn't happen. Without you, our athletes aren't given the opportunity to participate. Without you, the competitions don't happen. Without your training and dedication, Special Olympics doesn't exist, and the athletes don't have the sports opportunities. So on behalf of Jim Schmutz, our president and CEO at the state office, we thank you for your dedication. We thank you for your time and efforts. We thank you for joining tonight and listening to me for over an hour.
There's one more question that came in.
Yep.
Yes, yeah.
And
Okay.
I don't, George Mitchell asked, what is the maximum length and minimum width for the kayaks? And I believe it's 16 feet for the length, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, 16th. I don't think we have a minimum width though.
50, we're using 50 centimeters, which is a rule for para canoe Paralympic competition.
Steve, we should add that to the slides because I don't believe we have that in the slides.
Yep,
Okay.
I made a note.
Sorry, I
Cool,
didn't
thank
mean
you.
to interrupt, but I know this is important because I think I asked this question last year.
Gotcha. Thank you for stepping
Yeah,
in there,
one of the
Gina.
problems we're running into is that people are bringing in ocean kayaks, which are 18 feet long, 17 feet long, and down around 20, 21 inches wide. And that's they're technically illegal. We had 16 feet and the 50 centimeters, which was the standard for para canoe racing, para kayak competition, and that's the international standard.
Got you. Thank you for that. And again, I want to make sure we give time for any other questions, but also make sure that we're good to go here. So if you have any questions, what I will say to each and every one of you is that we will go ahead and post this within the next 2 days on a coach's resource page, as well as send you the link in the slide deck, the webinars with a couple of the updates that we've made note of this evening. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, Zach, if you want to go ahead and stop the recording.